When my mother-in-law Patricia laughed and said, "Well, Maya wasn't really invited anyway," at her anniversary party, she thought she'd finally gotten rid of me. What she didn't expect was for the entire catering staff to walk out behind me, taking every single dish, decoration, and server with them. You see, what the Rodriguez family didn't know was that I owned the catering company that was making their perfect celebration possible. By the time I was done, Patricia's dream anniversary party had turned into her worst nightmare, with 80 guests staring at empty tables and a very expensive venue with absolutely nothing to serve. But that was just the beginning of how I dismantled everything they thought they knew about me. If you've ever been excluded by your in-laws or felt like you didn't belong, this story of how I turned the tables might just be the most satisfying revenge you'll hear today. The sound of my mother-in-law's laughter still echoes in my mind whenever I think about that Saturday evening in October. I had arrived at the Emerald Bay Event Center in my best navy dress, carrying a carefully wrapped anniversary gift, expecting to celebrate Patricia and Manuel Rodriguez's 30th wedding anniversary alongside the rest of the family. What I found instead was a room full of familiar faces who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The venue was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, elegant floral arrangements cascading from every table, and the soft glow of string lights creating the perfect ambiance. I recognized the setup immediately because it was exactly what I would have chosen for such an event. As the owner of Emerald City Catering, I had an eye for these things, though I noticed they'd gone with Sterling Events instead of my company for tonight's celebration. I scanned the room, looking for Derek, my husband of 3 years, and spotted him near the bar talking animatedly with his cousin Sophia. When he saw me approaching, something flickered across his face. Not the warm smile I expected, but something that looked almost like panic. "Maya," he said, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "You made it." The phrasing struck me as odd. Made it? As if there had been some question about my attendance at his parents' milestone anniversary celebration. Before I could ask what he meant, Patricia Rodriguez appeared beside us, resplendent in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her silver hair perfectly. "Oh," she said, her smile faltering for just a moment before recovering. "Maya, how nice to see you here." The way she emphasized "here" sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the feeling aside. Patricia had never been particularly warm toward me, but I'd learned to navigate her subtle disapprovals over the years. Tonight was about celebrating her marriage, not about whatever complicated feelings she harbored toward her son's wife. Complicated feelings she harbored toward her son's wife. "The venue is absolutely beautiful, Patricia," I said genuinely. "And you look stunning. 30 years. What an incredible milestone." She accepted the compliment with a regal nod, but I noticed her eyes kept darting toward the entrance as if she were expecting someone else. More family members continued to arrive. Derek's brother Luis with his wife Jennifer, his sister Carmen with her husband Brian, various aunts, uncles, and cousins I'd met at previous gatherings. Each greeting felt slightly off, like everyone was in on some joke I hadn't heard. The cocktail hour stretched on, and I found myself gravitating toward familiar conversations about work, travel, and family updates. But every time I approached a group, the conversation seemed to shift or pause awkwardly. Carmen, who usually chatted freely with me about her kids, suddenly seemed fascinated by something across the room. Luis, typically one of the more welcoming family members, kept checking his phone with an uncomfortable expression. It was Sophia who finally let something slip. I'd cornered her near the dessert display, hoping for a normal conversation with someone who'd always treated me kindly. "The flowers are gorgeous," I commented, admiring the white roses and baby's breath centerpieces, though I'm surprised they went with Sterling Events instead of asking me to handle it. I would have loved to cater Mom and Dad's anniversary. Sophia's face went pale. "Oh, Maya." She started, then stopped abruptly, glancing around as if looking for an escape route. What is it? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. Before Sophia could answer, the event coordinator began directing everyone toward their tables for dinner. I followed the crowd, looking for the seating chart to find my assigned spot. Derek appeared beside me, taking my arm with what felt like forced casualness. Actually, Maya, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, there might be a small issue with the seating arrangement. That's when Patricia's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a knife. She was speaking to the event coordinator, but her words carried clearly across the room. Well, Maya wasn't really invited anyway. The seating chart is correct as is. The noise around us seemed to fade to a dull hum. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. And there it was. Patricia's laugh. Not the polite chuckle of someone who'd made an innocent mistake, but the satisfied laugh of someone who'd just played their winning card. I stood frozen in that moment, surrounded by 80 guests who were now staring at me with expressions ranging from embarrassment to poorly concealed relief. Derek's hand was still on my arm, but he might as well have been miles away. The beautiful venue, the elegant decorations, the celebration I'd been looking forward to. All of it suddenly felt like a stage set designed for my humiliation. The gift in my hands felt impossibly heavy. My carefully chosen dress felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. But as I stood there processing Patricia's words and that triumphant laugh, something else began to build inside me. Something calm and calculating. Something that recognized opportunity in the midst of humiliation. After all, they had no idea who they were really dealing with. My name is Maya Thompson Rodriguez, and 5 years ago I was just Maya Thompson, a recent culinary school graduate with big dreams and a small savings account. I'd grown up in a middle-class family in Tacoma, where my parents ran a modest family restaurant that barely kept us afloat. Watching them struggle to make ends meet while pouring their hearts into every dish taught me two crucial lessons. Passion without business sense leads to failure, and in the food industry, reputation is everything. After graduating from the Seattle Culinary Academy with honors, I could have taken a safe job at one of the city's established restaurants. Instead, I used my grandmother's small inheritance to launch Emerald City Catering from a shared commercial kitchen in Georgetown. Those first months were brutal. 18-hour days, sleeping in my car between events, living on ramen and whatever leftovers I could salvage from catering jobs. But I had something my competitors didn't: an obsessive attention to detail and an ability to create magic within any budget. While other caterers focused solely on high-end clients, I built my reputation handling everything from corporate lunch meetings to intimate wedding receptions. I treated every client's event like it was the most important day of their lives, because to them, it was. My big break came during my second year when I catered a tech company's holiday party. The CEO was so impressed that he recommended me to his contacts, and suddenly I was catering product launches, board meetings, and exclusive parties for Seattle's tech elite. Within 3 years, Emerald City Catering had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 12, with a client list that included some of the city's most influential businesses and wealthiest families. That's how I met Derek Rodriguez at a Microsoft executive's retirement party I was catering in Bellevue. He was there representing his family's construction company, Rodriguez and Sons, which had been building luxury homes in the Seattle area for over 30 years. Derek was tall, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that made me forget I was supposed to be working. He lingered by the appetizer station, complimenting my salmon tartare and asking thoughtful questions about the menu. "You really created all this?" he asked, gesturing to the elaborate spread I'd designed around the client's request for elegant but approachable. "Every bite," I replied, surprised by how genuine his interest seemed. Most people at these events treated the catering staff like invisible furniture. He asked for my card, and I assumed it was for potential business. I was half right. Derek did hire me to cater his company's annual client appreciation dinner 2 months later, but by then we'd already been on 3 dates. The Rodriguez family welcomed me warmly at first, or at least they seemed to. Manuel, Derek's father, was kind and soft-spoken, genuinely interested in my business and impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit. "It takes courage to build something from nothing," he told me during our first family dinner. My father started this construction company with just a truck and a toolbox. Derek's siblings were friendly enough. Carmen, 2 years older than Derek, was busy with her twin toddlers and seemed grateful to have another woman in the family to talk to about something other than diaper schedules. Luis, the youngest at 28, treated me like the sister he'd never had, always ready with a joke or an offer to help move equipment when I had large events. But Patricia was different. From the beginning, there was a coolness in her interactions with me that I couldn't quite place. She was never outright rude. Patricia Rodriguez was far too sophisticated for obvious cruelty. Instead, her disapproval came in subtle forms. The way she'd redirect conversations when I talked about my business, the slight pause before she'd introduce me to her friends, the carefully neutral expression when Derek mentioned our relationship milestones. "Maya runs a little catering business," she'd say, as if Emerald City Catering wasn't grossing $500,000 annually by our 3rd year. The word little always stung, but Derek would squeeze my hand under the table and remind me later that his mother just needed time to warm up. I tried everything to win her over. I researched her favorite foods and prepared elaborate dishes for family gatherings. I remembered her friends' names and asked about her charity work with the Bellevue Arts Council. I even offered to cater her charity events at cost, thinking it might be a way to show her what I was truly capable of. "That's very sweet, dear," she'd respond, "but we've been working with the same caterer for years." Consistency is so important for these things. That caterer, I later learned, was Victoria Sterling of Sterling Events, a woman whose family had been in Seattle's catering scene for 3 generations and whose client list read like a who's who of old Seattle money. Victoria was everything I wasn't: blonde, polished, and born into the industry I was fighting to establish myself in. The warning signs were there, subtle but persistent, throughout my relationship with Derek and into our marriage. The first real warning sign should have been Derek's bachelor party. I wasn't invited, of course. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the week-long radio silence that followed, and the way Derek's entire demeanor shifted when he returned from what was supposed to be a weekend in Vancouver. "Just the usual guy stuff," he'd said when I asked about the trip, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Luis planned everything. You know how he gets with his elaborate schemes." But Luis had seemed just as evasive when I'd run into him at the grocery store the following week. "Great trip," he'd mumbled, suddenly very interested in the cereal selection. "Derek didn't tell you about it?" The pieces didn't add up, but I was deep in wedding planning mode, and my business was experiencing its biggest growth period yet. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. The wedding planning itself became a masterclass in subtle undermining. Patricia insisted on being involved in every decision, which I initially welcomed as a sign that she was finally accepting me into the family. How naive I was. "Oh, Maya," she'd sigh during our venue visits, "this place is so commercial. Don't you think Derek deserves somewhere with more history, more character?" She'd then produce a brochure for some exclusive country club where her friend was a member, conveniently forgetting that their fees would have consumed half my business's annual profit. When I suggested incorporating some of my cultural traditions into the ceremony, my grandmother's recipe for the wedding cake, a small blessing from my family's traditions, Patricia's smile would tighten almost imperceptibly. "How interesting," she'd say, "though we should probably keep things simple. Classic. You understand." Derek played mediator, as always. "Mom just wants everything to be perfect," he'd explain. "And honestly, maybe the country club idea isn't so bad. It would mean a lot to my parents." I compromised on the venue. I compromised on the flowers. I compromised on the guest list when Patricia declared that some of my college friends might not fit the aesthetic we're going for. Each concession felt small in isolation, but together they added up to a wedding that felt more like a Rodriguez family production than a celebration of Derek and me. The reception was catered by Sterling Events, naturally. Victoria has such experience with events of this caliber, Patricia explained when I suggested we save money by having Emerald City Catering handle our own wedding. And darling, you'll be far too busy being a bride to worry about the kitchen. It stung, but I told myself it was practical. I would be busy, and having another caterer meant I could actually enjoy my wedding day instead of managing staff and logistics. What I didn't expect was to overhear Victoria talking to Patricia during the cocktail hour. I'd stepped outside for a moment of air, overwhelmed by the surreal experience of being a guest at an event I would normally be orchestrating, when their voices drifted through the open window of the bridal suite. "She really has no idea, does she?" Victoria was saying. "About the business connections, I mean. Half of Seattle's event industry runs through my family's relationships." "Maya's very talented," Patricia replied, her tone suggesting this was not necessarily a compliment. "But talent isn't everything in this business. Breeding matters. Background matters. The right people need to feel comfortable with who they're inviting into their homes." "Exactly. I've already had 3 inquiries about availability for events she was originally supposed to handle. The Whitman anniversary, the Chen Corporation launch, that tech executive's retirement party. Apparently some clients are reconsidering their choices." My blood ran cold. Those were major accounts, contracts I'd been counting on to fund my expansion plans. "Well," Patricia said with satisfaction, "I'm sure she'll find her place eventually. Perhaps something more suitable to her background." I stood frozen outside that window, my wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume, understanding with crystal clarity that my marriage wasn't just a union between Derek and me. It was Patricia's long-term strategy to neutralize what she saw as my threat to the established order. The pattern continued after the wedding, but became more sophisticated. Family dinners where important announcements were made during the one weekend I couldn't attend due to work commitments. Holiday celebrations where I'd arrived to find traditions already established without my input. Business networking events where I'd discovered Derek had attended solo because it was last minute, or we thought you'd be too busy. When I landed the contract to cater the annual Seattle Food and Wine Festival, the biggest contract in Emerald City Catering's history, Derek's response was lukewarm congratulations, followed by concern about how the long hours might affect our family time. "Maybe it's time to think about scaling back," he suggested. "Focus on the smaller local events. Less stressful." But the most telling incident happened 6 months before Patricia's anniversary party. I'd been hired to cater a charity auction for the Children's Hospital, an event that would put Emerald City Catering in front of Seattle's most influential philanthropists. It was exactly the kind of high-profile exposure that could transform my business from successful to legendary. 3 days before the event, I received a call from the hospital's development director. There had been concerns raised about my company's ability to handle an event of this magnitude. They decided to go with a more established caterer. That caterer was Sterling Events. The unraveling began with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It was a Tuesday morning in September, 3 weeks before Patricia's anniversary party, and I was in my Georgetown kitchen prepping for a corporate lunch when Derek's phone rang in the office area, adjacent to our prep space. He'd left it behind when he rushed out for what he called an emergency meeting with his father about a construction project deadline. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except the ringtone was the specific one Derek had assigned to family members, a mariachi tune that always made me smile. Since he'd seemed stressed about work lately, I thought maybe I should answer in case it was something urgent about Manuel's health or a family emergency. The caller ID showed Mom. "Derek?" Patricia's voice was crisp and expectant when I answered. "Actually, it's Maya." Derek forgot his phone and, oh, the temperature in her voice dropped 20 degrees. Well, when he gets back, tell him Victoria confirmed everything for Saturday. The contracts are signed, deposits paid, and she's assured me there won't be any complications. Something in her tone made my skin prickle. Complications? Nothing for you to worry about, dear. Just some details about the anniversary party. Derek will know what I mean. She hung up before I could ask any follow-up questions, leaving me staring at Derek's phone with a growing sense of unease. Why would Patricia be discussing contracts and deposits with Victoria Sterling about a party that was supposedly already fully planned and paid for? I tried to dismiss it, but the conversation nagged at me throughout the day. That evening, when Derek returned home looking unusually drained, I mentioned the call. "Oh, that," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mom's just being mom, you know. Triple-checking everything for the party. She wants it to be perfect. But she mentioned contracts and deposits. I thought everything was already finalized months ago." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There were some last-minute changes, additional services. You know how these things go in your business. Clients always want to add something at the last minute. He was right about clients making last-minute changes, but something felt off about his explanation. Derek was usually eager to share details about family events, especially ones as significant as his parents' 30th anniversary. This time, he seemed almost protective of the information. My suspicions crystallized into action the following Saturday, when Derek announced he was spending the day helping his father with contractor issues at a job site. After he left, I found myself doing something I'd never done before. I drove to Bellevue to see what was happening at the Rodriguez family home. I parked across the street, feeling ridiculous, but unable to shake the need to understand what was really going on. The house looked normal enough, no sign of contractor chaos or family emergency. But as I sat there debating whether to knock on the door or drive home, a familiar white van pulled into the driveway. Sterling Events. Victoria Sterling herself emerged from the driver's side, followed by two assistants carrying clipboards and sample cases. They were greeted at the door by Patricia, who gestured them inside with the warm familiarity of old friends conducting business. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching as more Sterling Events vehicles arrived. Florists, rental companies, specialty linens, all the vendors that would typically coordinate through the primary caterer for a large event. This wasn't a simple anniversary dinner. This was a major production, and every detail was being handled by Victoria Sterling. When Derek came home that evening, I confronted him directly. "I saw Victoria at your parents' house today," I said, watching his face carefully, along with what looked like the entire Sterling Events team. Derek's expression cycled through surprise, annoyance, and finally resignation. "You were watching my parents' house?" "I was concerned about you. You said you were helping with contractor issues, but there were no contractors there. Just Victoria and her team planning what looked like a very elaborate event." He sank into our living room chair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture I'd learned meant he was caught in something he didn't want to explain. "Maya, it's complicated. Uncomplicate it." A long silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. "The anniversary party is bigger than we originally told you. Much bigger. Mom wanted to invite some of Dad's old business partners, people from their early days in Seattle. Important people. And she felt that Sterling Events would be more appropriate for the guest list they were planning." The word appropriate hit me like a physical blow. More appropriate than your wife's catering company? The company that's handled events for Microsoft executives and tech billionaires? It's not about your skills, Maya. It's about relationships, history, the kinds of connections that come from being the right kind of family, I finished, from having the right pedigree. Derek's silence was answer enough. But it was what I discovered the next day that truly shattered my remaining illusions about my place in the Rodriguez family. The next morning, while Derek was at the gym, I did something that went against every principle I'd built my marriage on. I searched through his home office. I told myself I was looking for clarity, for understanding, but deep down, I knew I was looking for evidence of something I desperately hoped I wouldn't find. I found it in a folder marked Anniversary Planning, tucked behind his tax documents. The first document was a guest list, not the intimate family gathering of 30 people Derek had described to me, but a carefully curated invitation list of 85 guests. Names I recognized from Seattle's social register, business leaders, political figures, and old money families whose influence stretched back generations. This wasn't an anniversary celebration. It was a networking event designed to showcase the Rodriguez family's continued relevance in Seattle's power structure. But it was the second document that made my hands shake. A printout of an email exchange between Derek and his mother, dated 2 months earlier. Derek, Victoria's proposal looks perfect. The timing couldn't be better to demonstrate that we're moving forward with the right partnerships for the next phase of the business. Having Maya there would only complicate the narrative we're building. Mom, I know it's difficult, but Maya will understand eventually. This is about positioning the family for the future. The construction business is changing, and we need allies who understand the traditional way things work in this city. Derek, exactly. Victoria's connections with the permitting office alone are worth more than any short-term awkwardness. Maya's very talented, but she's not our kind of investment. Mom. My vision blurred as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about excluding me from a party. This was about Derek and his family deciding that my background, my business, my very existence in their world was a liability to be managed rather than an asset to be celebrated. I photographed every document with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Then I did what I did best. I made a plan. As the owner of Emerald City Catering, I understood the ecosystem of Seattle's event industry better than anyone in the Rodriguez family realized. Every successful event depended on a complex web of relationships: venues, vendors, staff, suppliers, and service providers. I had spent 5 years building those relationships, earning trust, and establishing credit lines that made last-minute magic possible. What Patricia and Derek didn't understand was that their appropriate Sterling events operated in the same ecosystem I did. And in that ecosystem, I wasn't just another vendor. I was a respected business owner with influence of my own. I spent the next week making strategic phone calls under the guise of routine business networking. A casual conversation with the manager at Emerald Bay Event Center revealed that Sterling Events had indeed booked the venue for October 15th, but the deposit had been unusually small and the payment schedule backloaded, suggesting cash flow concerns. Interesting. A lunch meeting with my linen supplier uncovered that Sterling Events had placed a massive order for the anniversary party: crystal stemware, silk table runners, premium charger plates, all on extended credit terms that were already pushing their account limits. My florist friend mentioned that Victoria Sterling had been particularly demanding about the anniversary arrangements, insisting on out-of-season orchids that required special ordering from her overseas contacts. The deposit for those flowers alone was more than most small caterers made in a month. But the most valuable information came from Ashley Kim, my assistant manager, who had previously worked for Sterling Events before joining Emerald City Catering. Over coffee, she revealed something that made my blood run cold and my strategic mind start racing. Victoria's been struggling since her father retired, Ashley confided. The old relationships aren't transferring to her like everyone expected. She's been taking on events at cost just to maintain the illusion of success. I heard she even had to let go of half her permanent staff and is relying heavily on freelancers now. Freelancers? I asked carefully. Yeah. Most of her servers and kitchen staff for big events are day of hires. She doesn't have the capital to maintain a full team anymore. For an event like the Rodriguez anniversary, she'd probably be pulling from the same temp agencies we use. The plan crystallized with beautiful, terrible clarity. I spent the next few days making more calls, this time to the freelance agencies that supplied event staff throughout Seattle. As someone who regularly hired temporary workers for my own large events, I had established relationships with every major staffing coordinator in the city. More importantly, I had a reputation for treating temporary workers well, paying above market rates, and providing references that helped them build their careers. When I called Sarah Martinez at Premier Event Staffing, the largest temp agency in Seattle, she greeted me warmly. "Maya, how's business? I heard you landed the Microsoft holiday party contract. That's huge." "It's been an incredible year," I replied. "Actually, I'm calling because I might have a last-minute opportunity. How's your availability for October 15th? "Pretty booked, actually. Victoria Sterling has most of our best servers tied up for some big anniversary party that day." "The Rodriguez party at Emerald Bay?" "That's the one. 85 guests. Full service. She's requested our entire A-team." "Why?" I smiled, feeling pieces click into place. I might have a better offer. The night of October 15th, I arrived at the Emerald Bay Event Center dressed to kill and carrying the weight of my carefully orchestrated plan. The waterfront venue sparkled against the dark waters of Elliott Bay, string lights creating a romantic ambiance that would have been perfect for an actual family celebration. Instead, it was the stage for my final performance as a Rodriguez. I had timed everything perfectly. The catering staff would be arriving within the next 30 minutes to begin final setup for the 7 p.m. cocktail hour. Victoria Sterling's freelance team, the servers, bartenders, and kitchen assistants who made events like this possible, were already receiving texts from Premier Event Staffing about a scheduling conflict that would double their pay rate if they could immediately relocate to a higher priority event. That higher priority event was fictitious, of course, but the pay rate was real. I had spent $12,000 of my own money to ensure that every single temporary worker Victoria had booked would have a compelling reason to disappear exactly 30 minutes before service was supposed to begin. The confrontation with Patricia unfolded exactly as I had witnessed from across the room, her laugh echoing with cruel satisfaction as she declared I wasn't really invited anyway. The humiliation burned through me, just as I had expected it would, but underneath the hurt was the steady pulse of anticipation. Patricia had just given me the perfect justification for what came next. As I walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Staff extracted. Sterling is in panic mode. Victoria just arrived and is frantically calling backup agencies." I paused at the venue's entrance, turning back to survey the elegantly appointed space one last time. 85 guests would be arriving soon, expecting impeccable service and exquisite cuisine. Instead, they would find Victoria Sterling attempting to execute a high-end catering event with no staff and rapidly dwindling options. But I wasn't done yet. My next call was to Marcus Rivera, the general manager of Emerald Bay Event Center. Marcus and I had worked together on dozens of events over the years, and he trusted my judgment implicitly. "Marcus, it's Maya. I need to give you a heads up about the Sterling Events party tonight. There might be some complications with their service." "What kind of complications?" His voice carried the edge of someone who had dealt with catering disasters before. "Staff issues, payment disputes. I'd recommend having your backup catering protocols ready, just in case the guests need alternative arrangements." Marcus was silent for a moment. In the event industry, a venue's reputation depended on smooth operations regardless of which caterer was involved. "Maya, do you know something specific?" "Let's just say Sterling Events might have overextended themselves. If you need emergency catering support, Emerald City is available tonight. Full service, complete staff. We can have everything set up within 90 minutes." I'll keep that in mind. My final call was to the one vendor Victoria couldn't replace, the specialty florist handling Patricia's out-of-season orchids. Those rare blooms had been the centerpiece of Patricia's vision, flown in specially from Victoria's overseas contacts at enormous expense. Hi, Elena. It's Maya Thompson Rodriguez. I'm calling about the orchid arrangements for tonight's Rodriguez anniversary party. Oh, Maya. Are you working with Victoria on this event? I didn't see Emerald City on the vendor list. Actually, there's been a change in the family's plans. The party has been postponed. Victoria should have called you, but things have been chaotic. You'll want to contact her directly about the arrangements. Elena's confusion was audible. Postponed? But the orchids are already at the venue. They were delivered this afternoon. There might be some miscommunication. I'd suggest calling Victoria immediately to clarify the situation. I could hear Elena muttering about deposits and last-minute changes as she ended the call to contact Victoria directly. Within minutes, I knew Victoria would be fielding frantic calls from confused vendors while simultaneously trying to replace an entire catering staff 30 minutes before service. As I walked through the venue's parking lot toward my car, I passed Victoria's catering van. Through the open back doors, I could see the elaborate appetizers she had prepared: smoked salmon canapes, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, truffle arancini, all requiring immediate service and skilled presentation. Food that would sit in warming trays while Victoria scrambled to find anyone willing to work an understaffed event at the last minute. My phone buzzed with another update from Ashley. 3 servers just called Sterling directly asking about the pay rate confusion. Victoria is offering emergency bonuses, but nobody wants to touch an event that's already falling apart. I smiled, settling into my car with a clear view of the venue's entrance. Soon, elegantly dressed guests would begin arriving for Patricia's dream anniversary celebration. They would expect cocktails served with precision, multi-course dinners timed to perfection, and the seamless service that marked truly successful social events. Instead, they were about to witness the spectacular collapse of everything Patricia Rodriguez thought she had carefully orchestrated. The real show was just beginning. From my vantage point in the parking lot, I had a perfect view of the chaos unfolding inside the Emerald Bay Event Center. The first guests began arriving at 6:30 p.m., Seattle's elite stepping out of luxury cars and ride shares, dressed in their finest cocktail attire for what they expected to be the social event of the month. I watched Patricia greet the early arrivals at the entrance, resplendent in her emerald gown, playing the gracious hostess with practiced ease. She had no idea that behind the elegant facade, her perfect anniversary celebration was disintegrating by the minute. My phone buzzed with constant updates from my network throughout the industry. Ashley texted from our Georgetown kitchen. Victoria just called 3 different staffing agencies. Nobody has available servers for tonight. Word is spreading that it's a disaster event. At 6:45 p.m., I witnessed the first crack in Patricia's composure. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see her in animated conversation with Victoria Sterling near the bar area. Victoria's usual polished confidence had been replaced by barely controlled panic, her hands gesturing frantically as she presumably explained why there were no bartenders, no servers, and no coordinated service for the 85 guests who were now streaming into the venue. Derek appeared at his mother's side, and I could read the tension in his posture even from a distance. His phone was pressed to his ear, probably trying to call in favors or find last-minute solutions to a problem he didn't fully understand. At 7 p.m. sharp, when cocktail service should have begun seamlessly, the situation became impossible to hide. Guests clustered around unmanned bar stations, elegant appetizers sat untouched on serving tables, and the sophisticated ambiance Patricia had envisioned began to deteriorate into confusion and whispered conversations. That's when my phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. Maya. His voice was strained, desperate. Where are you? I left, Derek. Your mother made it very clear I wasn't welcome. Listen, we have a situation here. There's been some kind of mix-up with the catering staff. Nobody showed up. We need help. I let the silence stretch, watching through the windows as more guests arrived to find Patricia attempting to maintain her hostess smile, while Victoria frantically worked her phone in the background. That sounds like a Sterling Events problem, I said finally. Maya, please. I know tonight didn't start well, but this is my parents' anniversary. Can't we put aside whatever happened earlier? Your staff, your connections. We need professional help right now. The irony was exquisite. After months of being told I wasn't appropriate for their social circle, that my business wasn't sophisticated enough for their important guests, Derek was now begging for exactly the expertise his family had rejected. I'm sorry, Derek, but I have other commitments tonight. Other commitments? His voice cracked slightly. What other commitments? It's Saturday night. Through the window, I could see Patricia approaching Derek with urgent gestures. Her earlier triumph had transformed into something approaching panic, as the reality of serving 85 prominent guests with no staff became undeniable. Maya, Derek continued, his pride clearly warring with his desperation. Name your price, whatever it takes. Emerald City can handle this, right? You always said you could pull off miracles. I could, I agreed calmly. But miracles require advance notice, Derek. Professional catering isn't something you arrange 30 minutes before service, especially not for an event of this magnitude. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Marcus Rivera at the venue. Rodriguez family asking about emergency catering options. Should I mention your earlier call? I typed back quickly, your discretion. Standard emergency rates apply if they're interested. What's that supposed to mean? Derek asked, clearly having heard my typing. I'm simply managing my existing business commitments. If the Rodriguez family needs emergency catering services, they're welcome to contact Emerald City through proper channels. We do offer last-minute event rescue, though our emergency rates reflect the complexity of such requests. Emergency rates? Derek's voice pitched higher. Maya, this is my family. Exactly, I replied. And your family made it very clear that they prefer to work with Sterling Events. I'm sure Victoria will find a solution. Through the venue windows, I could see the situation deteriorating further. Some guests had migrated toward the exits, clearly uncomfortable with the growing chaos. Others clustered in corners, their body language suggesting the kind of social discomfort that would fuel gossip for months to come. Patricia herself looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the stress etched across her features. This was supposed to be her moment of social triumph, a celebration that reinforced the Rodriguez family's position in Seattle society. Instead, it was becoming a public embarrassment that would define their reputation for years to come. Maya, Derek said, his voice now barely above a whisper, I'm sorry about earlier, about the seating, about Mom's comment. Can we please just fix this and talk about everything else later? I looked at my watch. 7:15 p.m. The disaster was now 15 minutes old and gaining momentum. I'll consider it, I said finally. But there will be conditions. The conditions I set that night changed everything, not just for the anniversary party, but for the trajectory of my entire life. When Derek called back 10 minutes later, his voice hoarse with desperation as Patricia's dream celebration continued its spectacular collapse around him, I was ready with my terms. Emerald City Catering can provide emergency service, I told him, watching through the venue windows as guests began openly checking their phones and making polite excuses to leave. Full disclosure to your guests about who saved the evening. Public acknowledgement that Sterling Events failed and Emerald City stepped in. And a formal apology from your mother, delivered in front of everyone present. The silence on Derek's end stretched long enough that I could hear Patricia's panicked voice in the background, demanding to know what I was saying. Maya, that's humiliating. More humiliating than serving 85 of Seattle's most influential people warm wine and cold appetizers with no staff? I asked. Your choice, Derek. My team can have cocktail service running in 20 minutes and dinner served by 8:30, or you can continue handling this yourself. 15 minutes later, two Emerald City catering vans pulled into the Emerald Bay Event Center parking lot. Ashley had mobilized our weekend crew with military precision, loading everything needed to transform a catering disaster into a flawless evening. As my team filed into the venue with professional efficiency, I finally made my entrance. The sight that greeted me was even more satisfying than I had imagined. Patricia stood near the entrance, her emerald gown wrinkled and her composure completely shattered, greeting late-arriving guests with the strained smile of someone barely holding on to her sanity. Victoria Sterling was nowhere to be seen, having apparently fled the scene once it became clear that her reputation was about to become collateral damage. Derek approached me as my staff began setting up service stations with practiced speed. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know this isn't how any of us wanted tonight to go." "No," I agreed, watching as my bartenders efficiently began serving the cocktails that guests had been waiting for over an hour to receive. "But it's exactly how it needed to go." The formal apology came as my servers were clearing the successful main course. Patricia, looking older than her 70 years, stood before the assembled guests and delivered the words I had written for her, an acknowledgement that the evening had been saved by the professionalism and expertise of Emerald City Catering, and gratitude for my willingness to step in when their chosen caterer had failed them. The applause that followed wasn't just polite social courtesy. Seattle's business and social elite recognized quality when they saw it, and they had witnessed a masterclass in crisis management. By the time the evening concluded with perfectly executed dessert service and coffee, I had received 17 business cards and 6 requests for consultations. But the real victory wasn't professional. It was personal. 3 months later, Derek and I were divorced. The proceedings were amicable, partly because the prenuptial agreement his family had insisted upon worked in my favor when it became clear that the Rodriguez construction business was facing serious financial difficulties. The investigation into their business practices, triggered by questions raised during our separation, revealed years of cost overruns, questionable billing practices, and clients who had grown increasingly dissatisfied with their work. Patricia never recovered socially from the anniversary disaster. The story of the failed party became Seattle society legend, but not in the way she had intended. Instead of showcasing the Rodriguez family's continued prominence, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of choosing connections over competence. Her position on various charity boards quietly transitioned to emeritus status, and invitations to major social events dwindled. Derek remarried 2 years later, choosing a woman from an established Seattle family whose pedigree was everything Patricia had wanted in a daughter-in-law. They live quietly in Bellevue, Derek having taken a position with a larger construction firm after Rodriguez and Sons downsized significantly. As for me, the anniversary party debacle became the foundation story of Emerald City Catering's evolution into Seattle's premier event planning company. The clients who witnessed my team's professional rescue that night became my most loyal advocates, referring friends and colleagues who appreciated the value of working with someone who could handle any crisis with grace and competence. I never did cater another Rodriguez family event, but 3 years after the anniversary disaster, I received an unexpected call from Sophia, Derek's cousin. She was planning her wedding and wanted to hire Emerald City Catering, despite family pressure to choose a more traditional option. "After what I saw that night," she told me during our consultation, "I knew exactly who I wanted handling the most important day of my life. Someone who delivers on their promises, no matter what." The wedding was flawless, and Sophia's marriage has thrived, built on the foundation of choosing substance over appearances, just as I had finally learned to do. Today, When I tell this story to young entrepreneurs struggling to find their place in established industries, I always end with the same message. Sometimes the chair that's missing from the table is exactly the freedom you need to build your own.